guys, my name's Nick and this is my channel Low Range Nick, where I do videos about four-wheel driving, maintenance for your four-wheel drive vehicle, and also fitting accessories. And today I'm going to do a video about fitting my suspension kit to the Mu-x. So I've got a full Outback Armour suspension kit here with pre-assembled front struts, 2 rear shocks and some rear coils as well. So just always make sure you chock your wheels. So I'm going to start on the front first, so I'm just going to chock these 2 rear wheels while I jack it up. So I'm just going to start by loosening these wheel nuts before I jack it up. So now they're loose, I can jack the front of the car up and take this wheel off really easily. So I've just raised the car on that left-hand front side with the jack under the control arm, just to lift that wheel off the ground. So now what I can do is I can take that wheel off, and then I'll put a jack stand under the chassis or the body somewhere, and then release that jack so the suspension can fully droop, and then I'll be able to get that strut out really easy. Take this wheel off now, get it out of the way. So now I've got this wheel off, I'm just going to put a jack stand under the chassis back here, just to support the chassis, and then I'll release this jack to let the suspension fully droop. The jack stands under the chassis now, so I can just release this jack. So here's the front suspension setup now, so you can see the standard strut in there. Got your sway bar link, front tie rod from the steering rack. You see these down in here. This is your top control arm, lower control arm, and obviously you got your brake system here. So all I'm going to do now is just remove this plastic cover, just so I can get access to the top nuts on the strut. So to remove these, just push the clips in, and then they just pop out like that. You just need to push the centre in, and you can pull the trim back like so. Come out really easily. Oops. And I can take this plastic trim off. So now you can see the top nuts on that strut, so they're just up there. So there's 3 top nuts I'm going to have to undo. Get that strut out, and 1 lower bolt down here. So the one thing that is most likely to get damaged when you're doing this suspension is your wheel speed sensor, or the wheel speed sensor wiring. So it runs down along the top control arm here, down the back, and down onto the hub. So every time I do suspension, I always get the wheel speed sensor wiring and the wheel speed sensor right out of the way, so there's no chance of damaging it. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of this wheel speed sensor, take it out of the hub, take this 12mm off, pop these little clips out, and then just sit it to the side so it has no chance of getting damaged. I'm just using a flat blade here just to pry those little clips out. They come out pretty easy. And then this is a 12mm up here. Come off pretty easy as well. The best thing about a new car is nothing's rusted on. What I've got now is another 10mm down here on the back of the hub, and then 1 more 10mm holding the actual wheel speed sensor in the hub. And once I take this last bolt out, it should be quite easy to just wiggle that wheel speed sensor out. And then I'll just unwind that and get it well out of the way. There's no chance of damaging it. There you go, there's your little wheel speed sensor. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these 4 bolts off here. you can see that tension that it's under now. So what I'm going to do is just hold it down with a screwdriver, just like this. Oops, got that nut. Now I'll see if I can wiggle this last bolt out. There we go. Just gently release that. You can see it was under a little bit of tension. Not really too bad. So now that hub's free. So just be careful it's not putting too much pressure on this brake line. So I might take this 12mm off here as well, just to release any pressure that might be on that brake line, just so we don't damage it as well. There we go. So that's released all the pressure off that brake line, so we shouldn't have any issues with that. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to take the tie rod end off, and also this sway bar link here, just so I'll be able to manoeuvre the strut down and out that way. I'm just going to take the 19mm bolt out of the bottom of that strut. Take the sway bar link off now. What I'll do is I'll just start by taking off the split pin on that tie rod end. There we go, so the split pin's out. So this tie rod end is a 22mm. Loosen that off. There we go. Now I'm going to show you how to get this tie rod end out without damaging everything. So basically the thing you don't want to do is smack it on the head like this. So what that's going to do is mushroom the thread. You won't be able to get the nut back on. Even if you leave the nut down here, if you damage that thread enough, it's going to destroy the nut and also the top of that if you try and get it off. So what you do is you shock it on the side, so you hit it here, and that'll eventually shock it out of the housing. Okay, so let's crack the tie rod in. Yeah, take that out now. So what I'm going to do now is loosen these top nuts on the strut. Last nut off the top of the strut. Just manoeuvre it down there. Sway that bottom like that. So there you go. That's the sanded strut. Now it's time to put the Outback Armour heavy duty one in. Alright guys, so now it's time to put the Outback Armour heavy duty struts in. They're pre-assembled, so it's just an easy swap over. So we'll just try and gently get it in here without scratching it too much. Just push it up through that strut now. Put some of the nuts on top, just to hold it in place. I'm just going to leave those nuts a little bit loose, just so I can manoeuvre it back into the hub down here quite easily. I'm just going to get my little jack underneath here. And I'm just going to jack this up till this bolt hole lines up. I'll just put this bottom strut bolt in, just through the bottom eyelet. Get that bottom nut on. This bit's going to be a little bit fiddly. You have to hold this in on your knees. Pry this down and then put the bolt through here. See if we can get it. so we've got one bolt in there, that's just holding it. Now I'll just have to do the same with these other ones. One more. That's the fourth one. That goes in easy. So cool, now I've got those 4 in. So I can tighten these 4 up because they're on a ball joint, so it doesn't matter sort of how the suspension's sitting when you tighten that up, because that can constantly move in there. So I'll tighten these 4 up and then I'll continue with these other arms. So I've tightened these 4 bolts now. So now I'm just going to go ahead by putting the tie rod end in. Putting the crown nut back on. And tighten this one up. So when I'm tightening it, I just need to align the crown nut up with one of the holes so I can get that split pin back through. I'll do that now. I'll just put the split pin back through that tie rod end. And bend it over. Put this brake line back on. So put the wheel speed sensor back in. So all I need to do now is when I take the sway bar link off the other side, is push the sway bar down a bit, just so the sway bar will line up with its hole, just because it's a little bit off now because I've lifted it up. Once I put that in, I'll jack it up until the weight is all on the suspension, and then I'll tighten all the rest of these nuts and bolts, and double check all the ones I've already tightened as well. That's how easy it is. So that's one side done, so I'm going to jump onto the other side, smash that out. And when I loosen that sway bar, I'll come over here, put that last nut and bolt in, and then finish this side off as well. Okay guys, so I've just finished doing the right hand side now, and I lowered that sway bar and got this side link and also the left side link in and tightened. So I've tightened all of this at right height, so I've jacked it up until there's basically no weight on that other jack stand that I had under there. So it completely lifted all the weight off it, and it was all sitting on this one strut. And then I was able to tighten all these bolts and the lower shock bolt as well, all at ride height. This side's done. I'm going to slap the wheel on, and then I'm going to start doing the rear suspension. Alrighty guys, so now we're onto the rear. So as you can see up the front there, I've got the 2 jack stands underneath the chassis. Now I've jacked the rear diff up as high as it will go, and then put those jack stands under. And now I'm going to take the wheels off, and then I'll be able to lower the diff all the way down to the ground, or as low as I need to be able to get those coils out. So once I take the wheels off, I'm basically just going to take the top and bottom shock bolts up, or the shock nuts, and then I'll jack it down to a level where those shocks are loose, and then I'll pop them off at the diff. And once I pop them off with the diff, I'll take them completely out, so pop them off at the top as well. And then I'll be able to put in the coils after that and lower the diff right down as far as we go, so I can slip those coils in. Alright guys, so I'm just taking the top nut off the shock absorber, the rear shock. Now it goes through this metal plate here, and then the nut's on the back side of it. And it's right up against the body. It's not too hard to get a spanner on there, but it's hard to hold the top flat section on the shock and then loosen the nut. So what I've done is I've put the spanner on the nut, put it up against there, and then with 2 hands I was able to actually turn it, the shock cover like this, which loosened the nut on top, which is much easier than trying to fiddle around with holding the flat section. So if it's not too tight, you can usually do that. and that worked a treat this time. So I'll just keep going till that nut's off, and then I'll be able to pull this shocky all the way out. There you go, so there's the left hand shocky all the way out. So now I'm just going to do the same to the right hand shocky and get that out of the way. So there's both the standard shockies next to the Outback Armour ones. And look at the difference in the diameter. It's almost double the size. So this is going to be perfect for going off-road. So now that I've got those shockies off, I can now lower the diff and get the coils out. I've just noticed this ABS line over here is getting a little bit tight. I'm just going to take it off this control arm just to give it a little bit more movement. Should be just enough to get the coil out. I'll do the same to the other side. So now I can come down just a little bit more. Those brake lines are still okay. So now these coils are loose. I'll pop out really easy, just like that. Cool. So I've just got the rubber top hat and I'll put it on top of the coil and make sure I've got the coils around the right way. Just going to feed that coil up in there. Just locate it on its little grommet. I should be able to pop that spring in just like that. There we go. It's one in and it's located on the top grommet. I'm just going to start trying to get this right side coil in. It's going to be harder to push the diff down this time to be able to get that coil in because the other side's going to put pressure on it. So what I've done is I've popped the jack out from underneath the diff and I've lowered it completely, and now I should be able to push this side down just enough to slide that coil in. So we'll just line up that rubber spring top into the grooves, and then that spring goes in super easy, no dramas at all. Just spin it round to the seating position on the spring seat so it's sitting correctly. Just double check that top mount's definitely on the right spot. Now we can jack that diff back up. So you can see this rear panhard rod bolt, I've had to turn it round. So I'll put the nut on the back side and just the bolt on this side, because otherwise it sticks out a little bit too far and it'll contact on your shock absorber. So now it's time to put the Outback Armour shockies in the rear. So I'll just compress them a little bit, pop the little tie down off and take the nut off the top and take this little rubber bit here off, and the rest goes through, and then this rubber section, this little top hat and that nut goes on the top. Now that both the rear shockies are in, shock tops all tight. Now I haven't tightened the shock bottom bolts or nuts just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack up the diff to ride height, and then I'll tighten both of those shock nuts. So there you go, that's raised off both the jack stands. So now what I'll do is I'll tighten both these bottom shock nuts. Taking both the jack stands out, and now I can lower it, sit it on the ground. Okay guys, there you go. So the suspension's all in with basic hand tools. I didn't use any, electric rail guns or air tools or anything. It was all hand tools and 2 jacks, and the rest are just basic hand tools you'd have at home. So it's a quite easy job to do as long as you get pre-assembled front struts, so you're not mucking around swapping the top hats over and stuff like that. And it can quite easily be done in an afternoon. So I started at about 4:30 and it's about 8 o'clock now, so it's 3.5 hours, full suspension kit in the Mu-x, and now I've just got to take it for a wheel alignment. which I'll do tomorrow at work. So after that I'll recheck all the measurements after the suspension settled a little and just see how much extra clearance I've gained. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and stay tuned for the build on this Isuzu Mu-x, and we've got a lot in store for this car and a lot of videos coming up of it off-roading and also installation videos related to the build, so stay tuned.